This is a little purse that I made quite impromptu on a live stream earlier on today. So I thought I'd make a video to show you how I made it, and I've changed the measurements slightly to make it a little bit deeper. When I made this one, I thought actually wouldn't it have been nice to quilt the front with it being a plain fabric, and maybe a pocket on the inside would have been handy as well. So that's what I've done in the video that you're about to see. So it's slightly deeper, better storage. I've quilted the front of the bag, and on the inside this time I've put a little pocket as well. And I think these are handy sizes, not just for maybe documents when you're traveling, or to use as a purse, or somewhere to keep your mobile phone, but for storage as well. This is the kind of thing I like to keep my sewing machine feet in, because it's big enough to put walking feet and buttonhole feet and the larger feet in there. Or it could be even hair accessories and things like that. Makeup, cosmetics, doesn't have to be just for sewing accessories. They're just really useful pouches. What would have been useful as well, an addition that you could make, would be to put a little loop on the side or on the inside with a key ring, keep your keys nice and safe, or even put a wristlet onto the side of that as well. But this is the basic idea. This is just to show you how simple it is to make a purse like this, and then if you wanted to add things like straps and wristlets, then have a go at the next one that you make and make those additions and changes to future purses. So go and have a look at your materials list. I've left it in the description box below, and let's get sewing. So I have two outer pieces. I'm going to use the lemon colour on the front of my bag and the patterned on the back. Two pieces of lining cut to the same size. So these are 9 inches by 7 inches, all 4 of those. This is the flap. So for the flap I'm going to have the patterned piece on the top and the plain piece as my lining. Those measure 8 inches by 5 inches, and then my pocket piece, that's going to be folded in half, is 1 piece of patterned fabric which measures 6 inches by 8 inches. So I've already fused fleece to the wrong side of the outer pieces. On the little bag that I made in the live stream, I used 8-20 wadding or batting, because that's all I had. This time I've actually got some H630, so that's fusible. The wadding wasn't fusible, so I used a 505 basting spray just to hold that in place. And I did think it would be quite nice as I was making this to add the extra pocket on the inside and maybe to quilt the plain fabric. So that's what I'm going to do with the front of this bag. So my fleece is on the wrong side of the 2 outer pieces, and then the top section of the flap. So let's start with the flap. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to round off the corners. So if you have a tool like the Corner Creator or a circular template, then use that. I'm just going to cut this into a curve by eye. So I just folded that in half and cut the corners round. You could leave it square if you prefer. Then we're going to pop on the magnetic snap, or 1/2 of the magnetic snap, to the lining section of the flap. So we'll fold that in half and crease the centre point. Take the little disc that goes onto the back, and about 1 inch from the bottom, we don't want to be too close to this edge because we need to get the sewing machine foot around there when we're sewing the seam. So place the bottom of the disc about 1 inch from the bottom over the crease line, and just make a little mark through each side, on each side, sorry. So if you do have a fine fabric, it may be worth just taking a little scrap of fabric of the same colour or very similar. So I'm just cutting a small piece of fabric here. We'll trim that down. I'm going to put a little bit of basting spray on the wrong side, so I'm just going to spray that over the bin and pop that on the back of my fabric, and that'll make the hole a little bit stronger, because I'm now going to cut through those 2 lines. So a very sharp pair of scissors or a quick unpick would work, and then take the thinner part of the snap and push the prongs through the 2 holes. We'll place the back over the top and squish the prongs out. I find it easier to press them out than I do in. And then let's take the outer and the lining right sides together and we'll sew around the curved edge. And I'm just using the edge of my presser foot as a seam allowance, which is around about 1/4 inch. My thread's just come undone, so I'll just need to rethread this up. What do we do before needle threaders? Okay, and then sew. So nice and curvy around the curve. So take that slower if you need to. Because that's going to actually form the shape of the flap, so we just want to make sure that that's a nice smooth line. And then trim just around the curved sections, quite close to the seam. If you've got pinking shears, that would help around that area too. And then we'll turn this the right side out. Now press that if you need to. I think we're okay with this one at the moment, so that the seam is right on the edge, and then we'll top stitch around the curved section. You may need to move the needle over on your sewing machine just to take the presser foot away from the magnetic snap as we come to it. Or if it helps, you could put your zipper foot on your sewing machine. So just again around the curve. This helps to give a nice crisp edge to the flap, but I also think top stitching is a nice finishing touch. Makes it look professional, a little bit more shop bought. So again, nice and smooth around the edge. And back to the top. Now this I'm going to sew to the back of my bag, so that's the printed side. Just move my sewing machine out of the way for a second, because a little tip for you, if you do have basting spray, you can always pop a little bit inside here, not too much, just to hold that together as we sew. Now my fabric isn't directional, nor is it? Actually it might be, but you can't really tell. But if it is directional, make sure that's the right way up. And we're going to place the flap centrally, so the same distance from each side of the back of the bag, right sides together, so pattern sides together, and then we'll sew across the top close to the edge just to hold that in place. So a couple of clips in there, you can use pins, and let's sew. There we go. So now the flap's on the back, I can work out where my second magnetic snap needs to go on the front. So let's pop the back and the front of the bag wrong sides together. I'm just going to fold this over and then mark on the right side. Oh, I'm going to quilt it first actually. I'll mark this anyway. So I haven't pulled that too tight across the top, so leave maybe 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch on the fold or something like that, and then make sure that's in the center. So I need to be 4.5 inches across, but I did say I was going to quilt this, so let's do that now. So I'm going to use a 45-degree line on my ruler, starting quite centrally, it doesn't have to be exact, and draw a diagonal line, and then I'll do 1.5 inches apart all the way across, and then in the opposite direction, and this is cross hatching. But I think particularly on plain fabric, it adds a nice bit of texture, it adds a bit of interest without using another colour, and I think a bit of quilting makes your project look quite expensive. So let's take the ruler and go in the opposite direction. And where did I start? In the centre there. That's it. And again at 1.5 inch intervals. You could make these larger or smaller if you prefer. Use a 60-degree line instead of 45 for a more elongated diamond shape. But this is just keeping it quite simple, and I'm going to quilt it in the same colour thread so those lines don't actually stand out too much. So we can go for a longer stitch on the sewing machine. I'm on a 2.8 and just sew across all of those lines to quilt. So just like before, I'm going to place my back over the dot that I made in the centre, and I'm cutting through the outer and the wadding layers. So don't make the hole too big. You can always make a smaller hole bigger if you need to, but it's difficult to make a big hole smaller. So push that through, put the back on, press the prongs open. And then I'm just going to iron away those lines. Now I've used a friction pen. Do a little test first on whatever fabric you're using this on, because I know I've said before that they're not designed to work with fabrics. So on some colours, particularly dark colours or reds, you may find that it almost bleaches the fabric. Okay. So let's sew this together. Oh, I need to do the pocket. So I didn't do the pocket on the previous one. So let's take our pocket fabric, and I'm going to fold this in half, right sides together, and sew all the way around, but leave a little turning up of about 2 inches in the bottom side. I mean, if you wanted to pin this, that's fine. So stop with the needle down when we pivot, sew across. That's where my turning gap's going to be. So just leave a little gap, don't need to measure it. And then back down the other side. Just gone a little bit too far there. And snip, and then we'll cut off the corners to make the fabric a little less bulky, so the points should be pointy. Snip those off, and let's turn this the right side out. So pushing the corners out. If you've got a turning tool or a knitting needle or something like that, will help just to push those through, and then we'll press it. Just fold the edges in and give it a nice press. Then I'm just going to just pull that corner out there. I'm just going to top stitch across the top. I'm not going to top stitch all the way around or close the opening at the bottom, because when I sew the pocket in place, the opening will automatically be closed. Now we'll take one side of our lining. Let me just snip off the thread at the end there. So this is the back section of the lining, and place this right in the center. Now I'm just doing this by eye, but if you wanted to measure that to make sure it's perfectly central, that's fine. And let's just pop a couple of pins in there to hold it in place. Now we could have made the pocket a little bit wider if you wish, so it could have gone up to maybe 8 inches wide, in which case you could have put a divider down the center. But I think this one is just going to be around about the right size for store cards or credit cards and things like that, if that's what you're using it for. So stitch quite close to the edge, and again when I come to sew across the bottom, that will automatically sew the turning gap closed. And back down the final side, and a little reverse at the top. Then we'll take out the pins and construct the rest of the bag. So there's my front and there's my back. And I want the pocket to be on the back of my bag. So let's place these two pieces right sides together. That's the one with the flap. And sew them together across the top. And again, if you wanted to pin, not a problem. Just make sure the edges are lined up. And then we'll take the front of the bag with the second piece of lining and sew those two together across the top as well. And then we'll sew the front and the back pieces together. So open this out. So outer to outer, lining to lining, and I want to make sure that the seams match, so that's the only place I'm going to put a pin, is at the seam at the top here, and the same at this side. Then I'm going to sew all the way around, but leave a turning gap. I can leave it in the side, I could leave it in the bottom, of around about 3 inches. I think I'll leave it into the side. It's not quite so noticeable in a side seam. So I'll start at the turning gap actually, reverse back a few stitches, and then sew all the way around. Let's pop the pins out. Then I'm going to take all 4 corners, pull the lining away from, or pull one side of the fabric away from the other, and just squish this so that you can feel the side seam sitting over the base seam. And I'll pin there. I shan't pin for all of them, but just to explain what I'm doing. Where the seam is, so where the fabric is in the point here, measure from there 1/2 inch down and draw a line straight across. The more you do of this, the less likely it is you need to draw the line. You can just do it by eye, but I'll just do this for the one bit. So with your ruler, have the ruler right on, or the line right on the seam, measure 1/2 inch down and draw a line, and then we're going to sew straight across that line to make the base square. And again, we'll do this on all 4 corners. I'm not going to cut that little bit of fabric off. I think that's absolutely fine. On a bigger bag I might do that. And again, the more you get used to this, the more you'll see by eye where that line needs to be. So let's squish that 1/2 inch straight across, and the same on the 2 outer corners as well. Now when I just turn this through, I'll be able to see that the corners are perfect. There's no reason why you can't just go back over those if you don't get them perfectly square, or you're not very happy with anything at this point. I think I'm very happy with that and that. And that one. And that one. So I'll sew the opening closed. So if you pull each side of the gap away from each other, you'll tend to find that the edge of the seam allowance just rolls inwards, and then just sew across the opening. And then we can push the lining inside the bag, and that is my little purse finished. So just the same as the one that I made before, but this time quilted on the front with that handy little pocket in the back as well. So I think you can see it is a very quick make, something that you could probably make easily within a couple of hours. So if you're making to sell, or you're making for gifts, or you want to make a few of these, then they are quite a quick make. But they're really useful little pouches as well, whether you're going to use them as a purse or if you're just going to use it as storage. So I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial, and I hope you make lots of them, and I shall see you again next time. Bye bye.